Hi, Maryellen. Ryan Sheffer here, PGA professional at Monarch Beach Golf Links. I'm here with a video review from our golf lesson we had last week. So this is just a photo that I put up just to give a little reference as to some of what we've talked about. What we noticed in your start of your lesson was that your shoulders looked more like the golfer over here on the far right, where his shoulders are pointing a little bit left. So we were trying to get those a little bit more square, kind of like the guy in the middle, maybe even feeling a little bit like the guy on the far left, where his shoulders are pointing off to the right a bit. So that was just trying to help you to be able to turn a little bit better in the swing. Now, in regard to turning, this photo that I just put up here is a good example of somebody who's swaying on the left. That was basically what we were seeing in your swing, where if you notice his belt buckle was moving closer to that dotted line there on his right hip. That's what you were essentially doing, where you're moving away from the target. What we want to do is try to look more like the golfer on the right, where there's minimal hip sway, and he's keeping his left hip a little bit closer towards the front dotted line or towards the target. So that would just be some food for thought, and then I'll show you a little drill that we did during your lesson to try to help you to accomplish that. Now, this was actually the drill that we were talking about trying to do. What I described to you was trying to get it to where you felt like you were turning your belt buckle or torso away from the golf ball. Basically, your back would be facing towards the target. This was about trying to make a deeper turn. And then on the downswing, trying to look more like this, where you end up getting your chest facing the target and your belt line facing the target. And you can see the golfer's right heel and toe basically pointing more down the target line. Now, this next clip is going to be mainly for your boyfriend, Steve, to talk about what we're trying to do in his golf swing to make some improvements. So let's get started here and watch this video. So let's take a look here at the golf swings that we filmed here on the left and on the right. These are obviously early in the lesson when we were first starting. What I want to do is zoom in over here on the left, and we'll talk about a few things that I see here in the setup. So number one would be the knee flex. So the amount of knee flex that we're seeing looks a bit probably more than what you would need. I think we could probably go a little bit taller in the legs. That would help you to be able to stand even a little bit possibly closer to the ball, and it'll help your posture a bit. So the reason I want to get the knee flex a little different is when the knees are bent that much, the first instinct would be to want to kind of like jump out of that, right? So when we bend our knees that much, we're typically going to want to stand up in the swing. So that's one thing for food for thought for you. Let's now take a look at the actual swing itself. So I'm going to draw a line here up the shaft of the club and then have that continue right through here. Now let's watch what happens in the actual swing. So as we swing back, the shaft plane is actually very good in the sense that, see, the club's tracking up in between those lines. So your swing plane is pretty good. On a negative side of things, if we watch your right elbow as you swing back, we can see it bends quite a bit. That's a sign of using a lot of arms and not a lot of body or shoulder rotation. What I'd like to see here is a little bit more shoulder and body turn. We could also probably increase the shoulder tilt. When I'm talking about tilting, we're talking about trying to get the left shoulder pointing a little more like at the golf ball, kind of more that direction. As we start down, the club shallows out, but what's happening is because your shoulders are in somewhat of a poorer spot, you end up trying to like kind of stand up out of this to try to drop the club, and then you can see that this kind of like upward jump. See, I was talking about like how the legs will kind of rise up. So that's what I was mentioning. So I saw some of that through the swing, where there's kind of this up and down motion that's taking place. In general, the swing's not bad. It's got a lot of athleticism in it, but I think there's a few things that we could fine tune to help you to improve some consistency there. So first being the posture with the knees, trying to get those a little bit taller. The other thing that we were trying to point out to you as well, which I'll mention here, is that the shoulders, we were trying to get them pointing a little bit more to the right. The tendency was for them, as I can see here, to point a little left of your target. So that robs you of some potential turn and makes it difficult to get the club to swing down in a solid plane. The way that you've done that is by, when you get here, you kind of change your posture. You actually rise up. So if I drew a line here, I'll show you a quick reference of what I mean. If we draw a line on your rear and then we watch what happens, see how when you swing through, see how you start to come off that line, you start to like stand up a bit, and then your rear is moving away from it. So that's the sign of changing posture. So what I'd want to do is work on getting you a little taller in the setup to try to see if we can keep the rear on that line as we swing. And that's kind of the first step that we'll want to do in our next lessons. Now the next thing we should take a look at, I'm going to zoom out of this one and we'll go take a look on the right. So now we're looking here. This is what we were talking about regarding sway. So if I draw a line on your right hip there going down, what we're going to see is when you swing back, the hips are going to move laterally away from the target. We actually want them moving more towards the target, meaning that you should create space away from that yellow line. Let's see what happens though. So as we swing back, notice how the hips cross over that line. So it's kind of tricky to see, but right there, that pant leg is starting to cross over the yellow line. That means that you are moving away from the target. You can also see even here that your elbows have broken down, right? You see a lot of bend in that left arm. Then as we come down through, we do a good job of trying to move the sways back to the target. So see how you're moving away from that line? That's a good thing. It looks like we have a lot of hand action though, trying to save the shot. So what I mean by that is, see how this kind of creates this almost like a U shape or L shape in there? And that's not necessarily what we want to see at that point in time. That tells me that there's a lot of flip going on. So that can make it inconsistent in regards to controlling the club face. And it could be a big part of why we're seeing the ball go right on you a fair amount. So some food for thought, definitely things to take away from this video. Number one being trying to, in your setup, feel like you point the shoulders just a little bit more that direction, off to the right. And then I would recommend standing a little bit taller in the knees. So those are maybe just two things to take away. There's a few things that we'll start to work on in future lessons, but as beginning points, I think that's a good place to start. Try to focus on the shoulder alignment being more right and the knees a little bit taller. So in conclusion, Maryellen, your main takeaway is trying to get a deeper turn, trying to turn away from the ball and then back to the ball, and then also trying to eliminate the hip sways. For your boyfriend, the main things are trying to stand a little bit taller in the setup, not as much knee flex, trying to feel the shoulders pointing a little bit more to the right. And then from there, just kind of continuing to practice that. There's some things I'll work on with them in future lessons, but I think those are kind of two simple things to just focus on for each of you. So I look forward to seeing you in your next golf lesson and helping you both to play better golf.